Hello and welcome to the Adapted to Screen podcast, a podcast where we take a book and its on-screen counterpart, or maybe a theatre counterpart, whatever's been adapted, and we compare them, we talk about them, we break them apart, and we have a bit of banter in the process also. This week we have brought the book Running with the Firm and the film ID. Now, the film ID came first. I feel that the book was in response to the film, because I don't think the film depicted the story quite how the author wanted to. But that you'll hear more about that in the show. This week, I'm joined by Phil McCulloch, as always, my co-host. We're also joined by guest Eddy Brimson. It says here on the Googles that comedian Eddy Brimson turned his attention to television, appearing as an actor in the likes of Thin Blue Line, Casualty, Between the Lines, Silent Witness, Absolutely Fabulous, and EastEnders. He was a vicious lout who turned over Frank Butcher's car lot. Also, the author of his most recent work, which is called Naughty Boy. And we'll also be talking more about that in the show. So, yes, please follow us on the socials, on the Twitter, on the Facebook. Please follow us on Spotify. You can find us on Spotify. That's where you'll find the podcast. This will also be broadcasted on YouTube. Please subscribe. Please give us a like. Please give us a comment on YouTube, because it helps the algorithms and all that, and helps us get the podcast out there. So, yeah, if you like it, please do that. But without no more further dilly-dallying, this is our chat about ID / Running with the Firm. Hi, Phil.
Hello, Richie. How are you?
How are you? You good?
I'm very well, thank you.
Brilliant. And we have a special guest with us today, Eddy Brimson, author and
stand-up comedian.
Tell us a bit about stand-up comedian. Yeah. So thank you for joining us, Eddy.
That's right. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm very good. Thank you, gents. I'm very good indeed. Thanks for having me along.
Good. No, it's our pleasure. Phil, do you want to take it from here?
Yes, well, as Richie said, Eddy is an author and a stand-up comedian, so we do have author's notes, which is very exciting. I don't know, Eddy, I don't know how much you wrote these notes yourself, or how much. So, Eddy Brimson is an award-winning comedian and best-selling author, actor, and documentary maker. Eddy became a professional comedian in 2000, quickly establishing himself as one of the most sought-after headliners acts on the UK circuit. Travelled all over the world and done solo shows in New Zealand, Australia, the Alps, that's very interesting, and of course the Edinburgh Festival. Previously, Eddy has penned 6 best-selling sports books based around football fan culture, 4 co-written alongside 2 solo titles. He's also previously written 1 novel, the critically acclaimed, easy for me to say, Hooligan. And this is my favourite bit about your about Eddy. His books have been translated into both Russian and Italian, with worldwide sales today exceeding 700,000. That would put any author to shame, I think, there, Eddy.
Yeah, quite happy with them. It sounds a lot, but it doesn't necessarily equate into a lot of money, because once you go to Russia and they give you $1,000 to publish your books, you never hear anything about it again, ever. So
that's a shame.
yeah. But it's one of them things that happens, doesn't it? You know, so
that's good. Yeah. That's good. But I bet you got a bit of a jolly over in Russia, though.
I've not been. My brother spends a lot of time out there, because we kind of went our separate ways, which is why I went to get in stand-up, and then I started to write books on my own. But he spends a lot of time out there. He's a bit of a face out there. But yeah, we've gone our separate ways as far as that's concerned.
Okay, cool. I say, because I think you wrote 4 book. The 4 co-written was with your brother. Was it the? I think it was a series of books. What was the series called?
The first book we wrote we wrote in the build up to Euro 96, which was because football was changing dramatically. Sky was coming in, and the way that Sky were packaging football, we felt was very different to the reality of people who were going actually week in, week out, and the way you were treated, and the darker side of football, because I understand all that. And so the first book we wrote was one called Everywhere We Go, which sort of blew the lid on organised football violence. Also, why people, we tried to explain the type of people who get involved, because it's not the stereotypical image that was portrayed in the press. Massive sort of go at the press as well for the way they reported stuff. The point behind it was to highlight why people if you want to solve this problem, you have to understand the type of people that get involved. They come from all sorts of backgrounds, all sorts of classes, economically and social, and understand why they do it. And then we offered a load of solutions that we felt at the time would have stopped me or my brother getting involved in it. And a lot of that stuff was actually implemented at the time. Things like bans, travel bans, having to put, report to police stations and stuff like that on Saturdays. So a lot of it that we wrote is actually taken on board. Yeah, but the press don't like to feature that. They used to just feature on the other side. So yeah.
Well, it's what sells papers, though, isn't it?
Yeah, totally. And then so we wrote another 3 on specifically one about London, one about derbies, and then one following England, and then we just sort of went our separate ways. And I made a couple of films following England overseas, and wrote a couple of books following England at tournaments as well. So which were great, which were diaries, which were brilliant. Following England away is fantastic. So yeah.
I'll have to get you on to talk about that another time then. So when was your quick question that I tried not to ask you while we were talking about doing the podcast? Have you ever met James Bannon?
Yes, I met him in Edinburgh. Because he went up there and did a show up there about it. Really nice fella. So yeah, I met him and got a copy of the book. Really interesting fella. So
cool.
Brave to do what he did, but very interesting.
Well, even braver to talk about it afterwards, I think, as well, because there's a lot of there's a lot of stuff in there, and we'll talk about this later on. But like things like how I think the book and the film really, it wasn't really about like football violence. Well, it was about football violence, but there wasn't really very much violence there. It was kind of how the police behaved and were portrayed, I think, more than anything else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, he kind of had a go at it on both sides, really. Obviously, I'm sure he lost a few friends, and there's a certain few places he certainly wouldn't walk into nowadays after exposing that. But he also did balance it by exposing the way the police policed football back then, and their role in it. And I've always had an issue with that. There's a big in all our books. I've always sort of the police make a lot of money out of football, a lot of money. Football clubs have to pay a fortune to police forces to police games, and even particularly now when there's not really that much, there's nowhere near the amount of trouble that there was back then. Our argument was always, I could walk into any football ground, as I'm sure most football fans could, and I could immediately point out if there's going to be trouble, it's going to be from that lot there. And there's not many crimes that you would say, I know where it's going to happen, what time of day it's happening, what day, and who's it's going to be. And yet the police never really have got on top of it, but they get an awful lot of publicity and make an awful lot of money out of football. And that's a question that we just always used to throw at them all the time. So it's an interesting subject, that. You could talk for ages about that.
It's a funny thing, because I don't think it's just the police either. It's like when I worked in security, like when I was working the doors, you'd have guards on the doors, and you'd have situations occur that didn't need to occur because the person that you were working with on the door was shit at his job, and he thought he was more powerful than, and he would just make situations worse, where somebody who knew what they're doing could walk in and talk the situation down and be more professional. And I think but listening to the story about the police, that seemed like the same thing. They were just they thought they had this authority, and they just wanted to push it and use it a lot of the time. And rather than making the situation better, which they could have done, they would just make it worse by going in and making things worse.
Well, yeah, 100%. The prime example of that, you used to get that back in the day. You get off a special return, particularly the West Midlands police. Any football fan back in the day would tell you the West Midlands police were by far and away the worst. You get off a train and they'd be straight on you, bang, right in your face. There'd be people pulled out before you'd even started. And that just would rile people up. But the best example I can give is during the Euros in 2000, which was split between Holland and Belgium. There were no problems in Holland whatsoever, because the way they policed it, they were there in a massive presence, but they just let everybody have a drink. Everybody is Holland, people were smoking, doing what they do. Second, we got over into Belgium, they were right in your face. And that was the one where from Charleroi, they deported like 280 people, just rounded them up, leaving people's wives in hotels that didn't know where they were. And the policing, the way things are policed, is a massive sort of it impacts on the people that they're policing. So if people are in your face giving you the biggie, after a while you start pushing back, really.
Yeah. So Eddie, when was the first time you? First question is: have you read Running with the Firm?
Yes. Yeah.
Excellent stuff. And when, because I think this is our first episode on a non-fiction book to start with. But from what I believe, the book came out 20 years after the film was made. Yeah. So this is the first time that it was the film and then the book.
Yeah.
When was the first time you saw ID? If you can remember.
Probably when it first come out, because there was a whole raft of films like that back then. So it was, and of all of those films, ID is without doubt the closest to the reality of what it was like back then. There's still some bits in it. When you watch it, I watched it again the other day, and there's some bits in it you just think, oh Jesus Christ, it's clearly just some director going, well, it's like this. It's like, no, it ain't like that at all. The blokes puffing the fire out in the pub, and all the fire.
That was bonkers.
The type of the mix of people, it was just ridiculous. But that's creative. That's directors having to have their input in it. I remember it's really funny. I used to do a lot of TV extra work, and it's really funny actually. Our first book, I was doing a casualty. And it was whilst doing this casualty that my brother and I had this idea to do our first ever book, because we were bored sitting around talking about the reality of going to football, how Sky were doing it. But it was a casualty, and we were doing a riot scene. Yeah. And there was a few of us at this bookshop, and then this big mob come around. They want to shut the bookshop down. So it's massive riot scene. It's about 200 people. And I'm leading the charge with there's 8 of us at the front, because we look like we do. And I've got this foam brick, and he goes, well, action. They come around the corner. I throw this brick, and the guy's screaming, cut. And everyone cut, and he goes, right, we've got to do that again. And he goes, and he goes, you listen, you wouldn't throw a brick like that. And I just looked at him and went, but out of me and you, who's throwing the most bricks? the whole of the place was cracked up laughing. But again, it's like, no, I don't want you to do it like this. I want you to do it. I said, okay, you do it how you want to do it. Yeah, basically.
That's mental. Yeah. Directors for you, eh? Who needs it?
Oh, talking about the film, here's a clip I want to play, because talking about fuck ups in the film, here's one. Let me see if I can find. This is all going to be edited anyway, so it'll come up nice in the edit. Here it is. Right. This is the bit where he comes home and he doesn't say fuck all to his missus. The what, sorry?
He chucks the paper on the...
Yeah, here we go. put the empty milk back in the fucking fridge. What the fuck's that? Why? Empty bottle straight back in the fridge. Fuck yeah.
Well, there's like this much. I'm sure
There was
that much.
fuck all in that bottle.
It's enough,
There was
it's enough,
nothing.
it's enough for, it's enough
Thirsty
for a cup of
workplace
tea.
workies.
Just a bit of
Drunk a
spit
lot.
going back in.
Yeah. So, moving back to obviously the film. So that was like, I mean, back 1989-ish is when you first saw it. When were you up to what you were up to with, or how different was it for you, Eddie? Like, were you with a big group of people, or was it just you and a couple of other people?
When at a maximum we had about 50 of us, because obviously I support a small town team, so it was different. But the scenes they've got of coming off of being on the train and being pulling up in a different town, and that they got that quite well. But that was all. That's the best it's ever done. That's where all the other films in this genre have really failed when they've tried to do the fight scenes. And the tooled up stuff, that just wasn't like that back then at all. Not people carrying big bits of metal and like what do you call them? The things you apply metal open with. So all that sort of stuff, that was all different. But the way it was kind of policed, and the police not giving you a toss and basically telling you to F off back home and don't come here, and if you want to come here, then don't be surprised if you get beaten up, So that sort of side of it was quite spot on, I suppose.
Okay, interesting.
I think from what I can tell, it varied from police force to police force as well. It wouldn't.
Yeah.
Some were a lot worse than others.
Yeah. Newcastle. If you go to Newcastle, there was always this thing. If you're going to play Newcastle, it'd be police from Sunderland, so they were always all quite all right with you. And if you went to Sunderland, it was the police from Newcastle, so they'd be all right with you. The coppers in the ground at Liverpool were fine. Outside of the ground, they were terrible. But inside the ground, they were fine. But by far and away, the worst lot were the West Midlands, always. And any footballer fan will tell you the same thing. Terrible, absolutely disastrous.
I would say I always presumed that like football violence, or groups of people who were determined to have fights with other teams was always organised, and we'll meet you here, we'll meet you there, we'll do it away from the police. And I think in ID there was only maybe or in the book, should I say, there was only a couple of times where they'd physically arranged to meet another team, and it was more the fights that happened.
ID's kind of pre all that. It's pre mobile phones, and it's pre the dance culture thing. It was later on. It was once it moved out of grounds, because CCTV, the seating after Hillsborough and all that. When it all changed, because a lot of it used to, back in the day, late 70s, 80s, it was virtually all in the ground. And it was after all that happened that it moved away. And then the mobile phones come in, drug culture took over for a lot of people. And then that's when it started to become organised. So that's all. ID was just kind of before all that, really, which is why it's quite random.
It seemed to be either, for instance, they was walking to the ground and happened upon a group of people, or at the train station, where I suppose the home fans would kind of know when those football day specials were coming in. And the police would walk you, and so there was all that. But back in the day, most of it was in the ground. But back in late 70s, it had happened. You'd go into their end, or they'd come into your end. So it was all about taking places over. So,
I always wondered, because it's basically an adult version of when you're at school and you meet up with the enemy school for a fight, and you meet up in the most random place. I mean, it does happen with the football violence. They'd meet up in the most random fucking place, and when you get there, you don't. Well, when at school, it wouldn't always end up in a fight. It would just end up shouting and bawling, whatever. But I always wondered. So, how did we get here? Somebody had to have a chat with the other side and sit down and say, well, where are we going to? There must have been a conversation. We'll meet here. Somebody knows somebody from the other side, and they've had the conversation. I'm going to come over and beat you up. Yeah, I'm going to beat you up. Where are we going to meet? We'll meet here.
It was a bit different. It was a bit different back in the 70s. late 70s and 80s, because you travel, you wouldn't wear any colours, and the thing to do back then was to go in. If you was at an away game, you'd go in small numbers into the home end, and then there'll come a point when you just let everybody know you were there, and then it will kick off. Yeah. So that's how, you know, that's what would be back then, and 9 times out of 10 it didn't quite work out.
It's always weird. It's always weird to me, because I always thought that obviously there must have been 2 people that knew each other, and they'd phone, "Oh, Dave, yeah, I'm all right. Yeah, good. Yeah. We're gonna have a smash up the weekend, bust each other up. Yeah, we'll meet here."
Oh well, that used to happen later on, but that was postal me, and that did happen. People would ring each other up and they go, "We're coming up. We'll meet you here. Where's your boozer? Da, da, da. We'll be coming." You know, and that's the level it did get to for a lot of the big, you know, bigger firms. Madly, absolutely. I mean, there's no justification to it, isn't it? You can't justify it. It's incredibly futile and idiotic, but ultimately it was very exciting. That's why people used to do it.
Before we move on to talk about the differences in the book and the film, when Richie mentioned then about the school fights, Eddie, your friend of mine, Hal Cruttenden, always used to tell me this story of the school that he used to go to. He say he used to go to school, Richie, just for your information, with George Osborne. So that's the kind of school that he used to go to. And their local rival school, who always used to beat them up, had Hugh Grant in the same year. So imagine the school fights and you're getting beaten up by Hugh Grant. He must have been like the worst.
No one's getting beat up by Hugh Grant.
Hit each other with gloves.
Hugh Grant didn't even hear about those fights. He never turned up.
But nevertheless, I need it for later. So I mean, one of the reading the book. Eddie, you know, the person who gave me the book, he brought Adam Green, formerly of Hilarious Comedy. He brought me the book for Christmas a couple of years ago, and I'd read it. And I think they got lots of things in the book were really accurate to the film, and I think it's even more interesting because the film come out first. Especially like as the in the book it was Chris. I'm not sure what the sergeant's name was in the film, but the way he was described, it was like to a T. They'd gone out and got like the actors, and like you could see them in the book as those people in the film, if you know what I mean. They really got that, I think, spot on. I also think they got his kind of I always saw Chris, we'll call him Chris because that's what his name is in the book, as a proper little job's worth. And it's just like who looked at him and thought, I know he'll be great as a football hooligan.
Well, but that's the thing. I know in the film everyone looks like stereotypical, but the reality is that they weren't. They come from all walks of life, and I've seen plenty of blokes who look like him, and they're usually the ones who are the proper loons. You know, they look like they're not. He's not gonna, but they're the ones who go, right, if that bloke's here, he knows what he's doing, and he ain't going to bottle it, you know. So they're the ones that used to be the scary ones. The ones, yeah. So
it did feel to me
it was good casting, actually.
Maybe because I came into the film too late. I only saw it last night for the first time, but to me, the book felt real to me. I could. It felt real. The film, especially the main character, felt overacted. I didn't feel it didn't feel real. If he'd have been like that in reality, he'd have got sushed straight away. Nobody would have ever taken to him. It didn't work for me. But that's me personally.
No, I totally agree with you, Richie. The pace of the film is because obviously they're having to get into it so quickly. It's so stereotypical. It's so like, and you know, obviously there's that for what he was doing. What he's doing, it really takes a long time for people to buy into you, to, you know, gain trust with something like that, you know. So obviously because of the pace of the film, how long the film is, they just really had to chug it along. And you look at it now and it's an incredibly, I mean, it's the best of the genre, I think, but you look at it and it really is dated. It's a very, very dated, and you know, you can't blame the actors for the acting, but it's a very badly directed.
So, did you not like Green Street?
No, I'm not a fan of Green Street. That was written by my brother. He's not a fan really of how it ended up. But again, the casting was wrong. The fight scenes are wrong. People love Green Street. It's massive, but I think it's an awful film. I think it's not
fair enough.
I think if you look at the films, like I mean, I think you could probably name 3 off the top of my head, where like Scum, The Firm, and ID. They were kind of BBC style British made films, probably on a small budget. But what I would say is the actors in them, they were all good actors. There were a lot of good actors in all of those films.
Well, those films launched so many good. Scum's a great film. A really, really good film. Scum. And
I think maybe the difference, say, between Scum and ID is that you always felt danger in Scum. It was like every second, you're like, what is going to happen? You know, you just the tension of what the fuck's going to happen next. You know what I mean? Who's going to get hurt? Who's going to do this? Where in ID, it was like, okay, you know, there was I don't think there was any like tension, but when you read the book, there was a lot, you know what I mean? But I think most of it came from inside their own group, if you like his issues with Chris, his issues with his girlfriend, and so on and so forth. And I think that's where I think the book really, like, as I said earlier on, I think the book really highlights the issues of the police, and especially when in the book when they were talking about meeting the Manchester group, I think it was Rory. And all the stuff they had the cars with all, like, you know, with all the cameras and the microphones in, and they had their own fake IDs and their own backstories, and all he had was a little business card with painter and decorator on, and it was just like, you know, the police weren't taking it seriously, but putting their officers in massive danger.
I think if they were taking it serious, they wouldn't have put him in that position in the first place. He was 22, and it wasn't until I heard that I thought, well, fuck me, he's definitely not old enough to be doing that job. He's definitely not had the experience, and there's no, you know what I mean? He was the wrong age to, and I'm not saying he's a kid, but he wasn't fucking far off at 22, and I just.
Well, you are dealing with some very some of the bigger clubs, in particular, people who are very violent people. Like McIntyre did the documentary about the Chelsea headhunters, exposing them and their links to the far right. I would imagine of all the stuff he's probably done, that's the one he wished he hadn't, because the grief he's had off that since, and he can be anywhere. If he bumps into any of those people, and it has happened to him, he's openly said, you know, this has caused me so much grief, because he's really targeted by those people, even to this day, you know. And when you get certain clubs, because they have affiliations with other things, such as Chelsea and that, then you're talking a whole different can of worms there, you know. And it's it's a very dangerous world to go into, I would imagine.
Are there a lot of these groups still going?
Well, on the football violence thing, there's still quite a bit of it around, particularly at lower level. Not really in the Premier League. When you get down to the lower levels, it's nothing like it was back in the day, but it still goes on. You know, there's still people.
Well, I was talking to a customer. It's probably about a year ago now. I'd phoned. I'm working within the pub industry, and I'd phoned a landlord of a pub up in Shrewsbury, and he goes, "Oh, I can't talk to you at the minute. I've got the police with me." I go, "Okay, whatever, no problem." And then he phoned me back about half an hour later, and I was like, "Oh, like everything okay?" He goes, "Yeah." He said, "I had to give evidence to the police because there was some like Shrewsbury football fans in here openly organising a fight with like it was like wolves or something." And I was like, "Does that thing still happen?" He's like, "Yeah."
Especially at that level down in them lower leagues, there's still quite a bit of it, and in non-league as well, it can be quite, because they haven't got the same policing level. So you know,
I think it's because the football's really shit at that level, so they need to come up with something else to make it interesting.
Mate, I watch Watford. There's football shit at every level, mate.
I mean, to be fair, when Elton John come in, I think he turned your fortunes around there, didn't he?
Well, that's my era. I started going. My first game I ever went to was in '73, and then we was in the old second division, went down to the fourth, and then I followed Watford all the way from the Taylor years, right through from '77 right up into Europe '84, and finished second in what was the first division, which is now the Premiership. Finished second. Yeah. I was lucky enough to go right through all the divisions into Europe Cup finals. So that was my kind of era.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. Segueing back into the film and the book, I think one of the biggest differences I noticed in the film is that the 4 police officers were always together, whereas in the book it was him and Chris, and then Jerry and Charlie did their own thing with what they called the targets. They were, a different area, whereas in the film those 4 were always together. And I think when you read the book, if those 4 were always together, like for real, they would have got sussed within seconds, within seconds. And there was a lot of and I think the question that Chris kept on bringing up to Jim or to James was, you are a football hooligan, and he was going, no, I'm doing the job of being an undercover football hooligan. But like, did you get the sense of reading the book that he was like enjoying it far too much, or that he was just
he definitely got pulled into it. There's no doubt about it, and I think there's a certain element where he would have had to. If you're going to do something like that, there is a point where you're going to have to prove yourself, or you're not going to get accepted. So he would have had to. And once that door's open, it would have been very, very difficult for him to pull back from it. And I think, there is a buzz about that kind of thing. And if you're in the moment and you've got no choice, or it's like, well, it's going to make your life easier to continue to play this game. I'm sure there were probably moments that he got quite a buzz off it, I would imagine.
I mean, there was. Oh, go on. Sorry, Trey.
I think again, a lot of it was to do with his age as well, because he was so young. He was so easily influenced by that scene and that thing. You know what I mean? Whereas the people around him, the other undercover agents or whatever they are, they weren't so. I mean, they enjoyed it. They enjoyed the games, and they were, but they weren't as easily influenced and drawn in like he was, to the point where you could tell from reading the book that he was on a precipice. He was on a line between, do I join this and leave my police work? He wanted to be that. The other guys, that they still kept that element of focus as to why they were there. And I think it must have had something to do with that. They were probably a bit older than he was.
Yeah, experienced coppers, they probably felt, the stuff they'd probably been through, they'd had a buzz on different areas and different sort of areas of police work that they'd worked in. But at that age, being a young man, suddenly surrounded by other young men, going away, giving it the biggie, getting pissed, being part of something, it's very, very easy to get pulled in. That's one of the things we tried to highlight at the beginning, because it is exciting, or it was exciting anyway back when I was younger. So I'm sure it would have been. He must have been walking a very, very tight line, but in a lot of the ways he'd have had to, because if it was kicking off and he was in the middle of it, people notice if you don't get involved, that you get found out.
And I think that was it. I think that was explained away very well within. I suppose it was earlier on in the film, a little bit later in the book, with the whole "I can't read." That when he came up with the idea of saying that I can't read. Well, why? Well, how'd you manage? Well, he does the reading and I do all the punching for him, so they can go to the football together. And Chris could take a step back and go and hide because he's not the fighter. And obviously then James can go on and do the work of 2 people while, Chris takes a step back in that scenario. But I think that was another thing that made me laugh as well, when they were giving their evidence to whether it be the chief commander or whoever, and he said, James has told him he can't read all right. He goes, well, how'd you get into the police force? It's like, fuck's sake. The state of some old girl, what I mean? It's like, for fuck's sake, mate, sort yourself out. But it also made me think, and it was later on in the book where he got arrested, and like bashed up a bit in the back of the van and taken to the police station. And when he was being put in front of the sergeant, said, "Oh, well, we stopped him and he tried to hit me, and then he swore and he lashed out." And it's like police are just making up what they wanted to make up as they went along. And I think, like, add to, say, for instance, the attitude to race as an example as well, didn't really put the police in a good light at that point. But you can see, well, if we don't like non-whites and we don't like football hooligans, we're just going to treat them exactly the same, and we're going to say what we want, and we're going to trump up any charges that we feel like. And like, when you look now, some of those people who were working their way up are in charge now. You know what I mean? And it's just like, so nothing's going to change within the police force if the same people are still in charge.
Don't get me started on the police, mate. You can go on all day away from football with other things that are well documented about my past, about my political involvement, stuff that the police do.
Oh yes, you know what?
They concoct all sorts of.
I didn't even get. Sorry, right? Because I didn't even get right. I left it at the 700,000 copies sold. I didn't even get to the best bit, which I had to talk to you about. Where is it on here? Here we go. Eddie is a keen animal lover and played a lead part in the national anti-hunting campaign, for whom he held the joint position of press officer for a brief spell. This led to him being under surveillance by MI5 and his subsequent arrest at gunpoint on suspicion of terrorism. Right, Eddie, talk us through your surveillance by MI5. Fuck's sake!
Well,
like James Bond sitting outside your house.
Yeah, like an episode of Spooks.
No, seriously, it was back in. This was all back in '93. There was a lot of stuff going on. I was very politically active. My particular thing was the animal rights movement, particularly fox hunting, and yeah, we come under surveillance by MI5, and then I got arrested at gunpoint. They came through the front door at 6 a.m, arrested me and my girlfriend on suspicion of planting 2 explosive packages in Windsor. And the second they came through the door, they then. I didn't do it, right? And then I was in the car. Right? But I was in the car going to Windsor with a copper each side of me, and they were telling me every detail about my life, my friends, my family, phone calls I'd had with people. I'm sitting there listening to this, thinking, and obviously not saying anything. And then all of a sudden, it realised all them people I thought I recognised. That I kept saying, "I'm sure I know that bloke. I'm sure I know that fella." These are the people who had me under surveillance for six months, and it carried on afterwards. And I could go on for ages, but
yeah, of course,
they continually arrested me because those charges. It's a long story. They'd obviously been told to come through the door before they had the right evidence, or had.
Is this being monitored? Should I have my VPN on?
But they then kept arresting me, and I got taken to. I ended up in Bow Street Magistrates on a very serious charge, and the evidence that the police gave and the description of me, I couldn't have described me as well as 3 coppers described me, and then they made up this whole story, and then amazingly produced some evidence which proved that I wasn't even there, and then the next day I'm saying, my solicitor's saying, because we had to go back the second day. And I had accused it. I was having to defend myself because I'd used up all my legal aid. And I'm in the Bow Street Magistrate, and I got up. And my mate had a barrister. The first thing I said, I just want to remind the police officer that he's under oath. And the judge went fucking mental. The mate's barrister just put his head in his hands. He said, "How dare you come into my court and tell a police officer how to give evidence? How dare you?" And I thought I was going. This was a very serious charge. I thought, well, I'm going away for a long time here. I've got no chance. So I just looked at the judge and I went, "I'm saying that because he's lying." And again, my man's parents went, "Oh my God, I can't go." And then the next day, right, they brought in this evidence, proved it was wrong. Whilst we was downstairs with my mate's barrister and the police's prosecution, it come out, my mate's barrister goes, "Well, this is all lies." And we went, "Well, we told you it was 3 of us. We told you it was lies." The conference turned to me and he went, "We'll get you someday, Ed, on something." And they all left. And my mate's barrister said, "We're going to sue the arse out of these." We come in the next day and evidence has come to light. There's no evidence for a prosecution. And then the judge looked straight at me and went, I don't believe for 1 minute police officers sit in a room to concoct evidence to gain a conviction, case dismissed. And then I said to my barrister, we got video evidence here. And we went to get the video evidence, all been destroyed.
Oh, shock horror.
Yeah.
Shock horror.
So it ended up with just nothing. And it was a very, it's a big charge. But because it was animal rights, you're dealing with the establishment, it's particularly fox hunting, landowners, gentry, royal family, people right at the very top of the pyramid. They come down heavily.
Was that at the same time as?
Sorry, Phil, I need to stop you right there, just in case we're being watched. I just want Phil. I'm absolutely fine with fox hunting. Carry on. I'm done. That's it. You do what you got to do.
It was a long time ago that it came out. The police that had been like undercover with it, whether it's animal rights or eco protesters,
and
they got like and they started having sexual relationships, and they've got women pregnant and stuff.
That was at the same time because we had a big AGM in Nottingham, and everyone started infighting. And certainly when you look back on it afterwards, you realise we'd been infiltrated quite massively by the same sort of thing with this, right? And they infiltrated because all of a sudden you realise there's people within us who are giving all the information because they know we're here, we're there. And it was at that time where that officer with the Nottingham branch, who were massive within the anti-hunt movement, that's when that officer had a kid with a woman. And that all come out exactly the same time. That's when that was all going on. Yeah. It's an interesting time.
This podcast has just taken a complete different turn there. It was about a fiction or a non-fiction book has just turned out to all coppers are bastards. But we all knew that already, didn't we? So, there's nothing new there. But very interesting, though, Eddie. Very interesting indeed. Where should we pick up from in the... Well, I don't know. I don't even know what to say now.
The trailer. Shall I play the trailer?
Yeah, play the trailer.
Work from
Let's
that.
have a look.
Okay, let's have a look at the 19. How long ago was it?
It's 1989, I reckon.
Yeah,
something like that.
Let's have a look.
Shadwell Town fans call their ground the Kennel. Their nickname's the Dogs. We want you in there with them. Someone's organising this lot. We want the generals, not the foot soldiers.
When you're right there, in the thick of it.
Seen you before, Tommy? Yeah, the Rocks are local. Nick like duck.
And all you've got to rely on is your mates.
What do you look like?
Where'd you have a drink? So how you get in with her?
I hope it was worth it.
Boys and me, we're off the home and kick some bleeding heads in. You on for it?
There's just one thing you better remember.
Looking for decent brandy. That's me, Sarge.
That's who you are.
Got some good stuff from the surveillance camera at Wapping.
Who is it?
Oh, we don't know him. Thought you might be able to put a name to the face.
Who is that runt, John? No one I know.
Do you see Brandon? Any problems with your work?
Only those the old Bill give us, sir.
I don't know what's happening to us. What's wrong with being happy?
Try looking at yourself in a mirror. You're a hooligan, John.
Really wanna be a bad boy. You overstepped the mark. Give me my marker. Let me know where I'll stop. Surely this is it? The edge, isn't it? Tell me when I've touched the bone.
ID.
Two things that I take from that trailer is I think, was that voice Phil Davis? It sounded very much like Phil Davis because I think he directed the film. But then I'm talking to I'm talking to Eddie like because he didn't even know. I think one of the other differences from the book and the film is that he never met anyone who was like at the top kind of thing. That was his whole thing, getting with the group, find out who were the people who were running the top end. And in the film he meets the I think was it Marcus in the pub when he goes, he wants to go and see you, and he's like, football violence, it's for the idiots. I'm all about drugs and this, that, the other, and that never went anywhere in the film. It was like, a 30-second clip of him meeting this supposed top chap, but in the book he never met anyone until they sussed out Jerry and Charlie were old Bill, because they were driving around in an old police van with police written on the side. You think, for fuck's sake, what the fuck are you doing?
Yeah, well, there you go. Not the cleverest tools in the box. But
No, but I think that was the thing, though, wasn't it? Because when he was talking about meeting the Manchester police, they were MI5. They had everything they needed, and then you got these four embedded in Millwall, and they're driving around in a police van with police written on the side. And you're like, for fuck's sake, how the fucking hell did you even survive? How did you survive? Oh, obviously, one of the other differences, of course, is in the film, it gets cut, like they get cut at the end of the season, where they have 2 seasons in the book. Like, they're there for 2 years. Well, I think looking at it, they were really the only standout differences, because it was, in some parts, it was word for word, I think, as well.
Yeah, it was pretty true. A lot of it was pretty true. He must have had some input into making sure that they made it as close to the book as possible to give it some realization. It's just, obviously, with a film, it's just got to ramp up the directors have got to have their say in what they think it is, and to try and glamorize it or try and make it stereotypical, don't they? So, yeah.
Well, I know you said that, but I think the book did come out afterwards as well, I think. So that's one of the. So it's, I don't know whether, like, obviously he's wrote down what he thought, like he's wrote down his experience, and then obviously in the book later on, it kind of marries up very much word for word what happened, which is unusual, really, especially for an actual, like, if you take any, like, a dramatization as an example, there's always, like, there's always license for the director or the producer to just go, well, we'll just do this, because we don't know.
What I mean by that is the bits that were cut, the bits that the makeup of the firm, and we got to have one of these, we've got to have one of that, we've got to have someone who does this. Of course. And that's where it lets down, and that's the only real major differences from the book. It takes, it does. Obviously, the book's far more in depth and obviously real and totally true to life. It's his encounter with it, but that's what I meant by the director's license. That when they just have their own perception of what it is, rather than actually, I'm sure if he'd have sat there all the way through and went, well, you don't need a fire eater. Do you know what I mean?
When I saw that, I was like, what on earth is this Moulin Rouge?
Maybe it's true. Maybe there was a fire eater in the pub. Everybody knows a fucking clown. It's usually me and Marple.
That's very true. Yeah, that's very true. Where did Gumbo come from? Like, just as an idea, as a character, it didn't seem to. Like it fit in very well, but like it didn't make, like when you read the book, you're like, where have they got Gumbo?
Where's Gumbo?
Yeah. Well, there's some far worse characters down at Millwall at that stage back then. They used to go dressed up as surgeons in the surgeons' masks, and the surgeons all in one gear, and then people were going to butchers' coats and all that sort of stuff. It was very, very strange. Very strange club, Millwall, back then.
The funny thing is, I actually think Gumbo might have been a real character that didn't make it in the book afterwards, because he felt to me like one of the most real characters in the film.
Possibly. There's always someone who's the target of everybody's, who wants to belong, who's the target of everybody's sort of ribbing, but they'll always look after it because it's part of it. But there's always one, and you do get some weird people follow football. There's no doubt about that.
I think Lee Ross done a really good job, actually, as Gumbo, because he reprised the role as well, didn't he, in ID2? If you've ever saw ID2 before.
No, I think I watched.
Yeah, well, no, yeah, but like 30 years later, I watched about 25 minutes and I was like, I can't.
Have you ever seen Green Street?
Yeah. Well, we were just talking about it before you joined. Yeah, I saw Green Street.
Green Street 2 has to be the worst film that I've ever seen in my life. It's just incredibly bad. Incredibly
I have
bad.
seen
Shot
I
in
have seen
America.
Green Street. I've seen Green Street 2 once. And yeah, I wouldn't watch it again. I know they did a third one with Scott Adkins, and as much as I love Scott Adkins, I think he's brilliant. I'm not watching that film because I don't want to watch him in a really bad film.
It's funny, I haven't seen Green Street 3. I didn't know they'd done a third.
There's a third. There's a
I didn't know they'd done a
Yeah.
third.
Yeah,
There's a trailer
I think.
for a third.
Yeah, so
Wow.
I think the premise is Scott Adkins is like former top boy, done well for himself, and then he finds out his brother was like killed in a hooligan fight or whatever. I'm not quite sure, and then he comes back to sort out whatever.
Right.
But I'm just like, no. What did you think? What we're talking about football violence films? What did you think of The Football Factory?
Again, parts of it are really good. It's not a bad film, but there's just some scenes in there you just think, oh, why did you put that in? The scene where they're watching their kids play football, staring at each other it's just like,
yeah,
why did you do that? Why did you do that?
Well,
Yeah.
I think
it's just things like that it just for me that's just lets a film down. But it's a good film because it's not just about that. It's a bit more in depth about the drug taking and how you get pulled in and all that sort of stuff. So it's a better film. I think Football Factory.
Well, I suppose that's what you were saying earlier on about the differences for say pre-mobile phones and crowd violence in the stand to mobile phones being able to meet up and the generation gap of football violence, I suppose.
Yeah. It sort of brought it all up to date without a doubt. So it covered all the aspects of how organised it was back then. But again, the thing again that lets it down is the fight scenes and all that. You don't have to have thousands of people to have a realistic fight scene about football. You can do it with very few people and make it very, very graphic and real, because a lot of the time that's what it's actually like. You turn the corner and there's like 15 of you and you just happen to turn the corner and walk into 15 other blokes and it's like, oh God, here we go. This ain't going to be good. And when you walk into it, it's very easy with clubs like West Ham and Millwall and Chelsea. You've got thousands of people, but it's when you go to somewhere like Orient and there's 10 of them, but there's 10 blokes who really, really want to have a fight, rather than 1,000 people where probably, a handful of them, 50 of them want to fight out of 1,000 because most of them are hangers on, so it's very different. So you can make it, but the fight scenes are integral to these movies and they don't really ever sort of nail it, in my opinion.
It's
they
always
had some actual scenes, didn't they? In the film, you could tell it was actual footage from actual CCTV from back in the day.
In ID.
I think, or maybe it was dramatized.
There were a couple of good long shots of crowds sort of surging and all that, but yeah, and they did the crowd scenes pretty well in ID, which is because they did have big numbers to do all the singing and all that sort of stuff, so they were quite good. But the fight scenes were pretty pony, but they're probably the best ones of all of them.
It was the surveillance footage that they used in the in the police station. I think might have been near the start, and you can see some of the fights that actually happened.
That wasn't.
No.
There was.
Was it not?
Dr. Truman was in those footage.
Yeah.
He was in that footage.
I don't know. They obviously filmed some of it at games, like where they're walking him around the pitch and he's getting pulled out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They're obviously gone. We're going to film something. If you want to see, they've gone over it, and so that all looks quite real. Where they're walking him around the pitch and people are chucking stuff at him, because that's all quite fun.
So,
question.
Richie,
just a quick question, because I haven't made it to the end of the book yet because I've been lazy this time. I usually use Audible, so when I'm at work and do my thing, I can listen to it all day, and I can do a book within a couple of days. But this wasn't on Audible, so I've had to, for the first time in God knows how long, read a book. It's not my thing. So I've got most of the way through. Now, at the end of the film, it's the whole white supremacist movement, and he's in doing the old big Z car thing, and he's old sergeant comes over. What the fuck you doing? Blah blah. And he says, "I'm in the middle of a job," and then you just see him standing there on his own, getting the old Z car, and he's like, and I was left wondering, okay, so was he on a job or was he not? What the fuck's going on? So, does the book elaborate any more on that?
That doesn't happen.
No, that's just an add-on at the end of the book.
That's just the way to end the film.
Yeah.
Didn't end it very well.
It didn't.
It just left me with questions that didn't need asking because it probably didn't happen.
Yeah, and it also takes away quite a bit from the actual book because it's like that just didn't happen, so that takes away some.
But that's also painting the author in a really bad fucking light as well.
Totally. So it's a real. That's the biggest bollock dropped away from the book and between the book and the film. Yeah.
Wow.
I think. Well, there's a couple of things you can take from that. Obviously, the book wasn't out first; it was the film done first. So I suppose.
But even so, he had to put his seal of approval on that, and to have him.
But
not necessarily. He might not have had that
once
much.
You've sold it.
He's sold the rights. They can do all sorts. I mean, I know that happened quite a bit with Green Street. That once the story you've necessarily put in front or they buy the rights off you can change dramatically once the director gets on.
Yeah. I'd have been pissed. I'd have been so fucking angry.
I would have looked at the bank balance and been a little bit less.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah. Because I think if you like Richard did maybe read the book before you watch the film. In the book, he clearly would need at least a year off of doing nothing to get his head back to, because 20 pints a day and 6 full Englishes a day for 2 years was not, plus beating people up was not really like a lifestyle that you could carry on. And I'm sure that if at the end of that, at the end of the operation, if they went, right, we've got a new one for you and it's infiltrating the NF, go on, off you go. He was clearly not mentally stable enough to do anything like that. So
you could argue that he was just in the right frame of mind to do it.
but exactly. But I mean, I suppose for the film they needed an end, and the end because the end of the book was he had a meeting with again, I think it was Rory from the Manchester depot. Oh no, it wasn't. It was was it MI5 or security services who wanted him to go? They wanted him to go and work for them. And he turned down the Barbados job, and then he was having a meeting, and he said, "Well, what?" And James said to the guy, "What do you think I should do?" He said, "If I was you, I'd walk away, just quit the force, and just go and do whatever you want to do. Because if you can do what you're doing now, you can do whatever you want to do." And then a week later, he handed his notice in and he left. And then, I think he obviously took acting lessons, wrote the screenplay. And started his own airline. Did you ever ask him about the airline, Eddie?
No,
because that's one question I want to know. He just started his own airline. It's like, how the fuck did you do that? Just one day. Do we know what it was called?
No.
Well, I think he said in the book. He said the margins are really small but really profitable. But I almost lost everything, so don't do it. So I'm just going to go and buy a Boeing. Yeah, I'm going to buy a Boeing and I'll fly it to Ibiza during the summer. Why not? No, so that's how he ended up in real life.
I don't need to finish the book now, then, do I?
No,
don't worry about it.
No,
you don't.
No. So, he did say that he never spoke to. Well, he'd only ever spoke to Chris once after that, and that was at the lady's funeral who was looking after their office.
Angie.
Look. Angie, yeah, so she died, and then he said hello or whatever, and that was it. He never spoke to him after that since, really. He did say, well, I can see their relationship was very fractious from the start. I suppose Chris being what I could just class as a job's worth, a copper's copper, just a proper little job's worth, not liking James really, and what James was doing, even though James was doing police work, just not the way he wanted him to do it. He did say, He did say he'd been down to a few games and all that, hadn't he? He'd gone down to games and bumped into a couple of people, which I thought was really fucking brave. Like, why the fuck would you do that? You'd steal.
It's a weird one.
Steal
In some
welfare.
ways, there'll be some, I would imagine, who were like quite proud of like being able to go and mates, that was me, that's based on me, and kind of like that kind of notoriety, I suppose. So yeah. The thing with him going, the license in the film where he then goes into that area of the far right, it just wouldn't have happened anyway, because there could have well have been a bit of a crossover with people who'd fooled at football, because he'd probably come across a few of the same faces,
Yeah,
of course,
sure.
yeah.
Particularly with Millwall. So yeah.
Yeah, you would have got a lot of white supremacists in the football hooligan type environment. I'm sure you probably came across them yourself.
Yeah.
Oh.
They were right back in the 70s.
I was going to ask you both what your favourite parts of the film were before we move on to Eddie's book. But there's one scene that I've just remembered that I can remember watching back then, like back in the day on VHS, that wasn't in the Amazon Prime movie or the new movie. Is when he sits in his house with a bowl of cornflakes and throws a load of cocaine over it. And
I've been there. We've all done it.
Yeah, I watched that. I watched it again a couple of days ago, and that scene was in it.
No, was it?
Yeah. That scene was in it.
I just must not have been paying attention at the time. I remember him sitting down with a big wrap and just cocaine on the cornflake.
I watched it. It was in it last night when I watched it.
I watched it at the weekend. It was in there.
I just must have
I think he wasn't.
He smashed his ass up and sits down, gets it, and he takes the wrap out and he just pours it
with the TV that's broken, he's sitting looking at the smashed TV. I must have turned away for a second. I just must have done. But Richie, Richie, what was your favourite scene, and what was your kind of takeaway scene from the film?
I like the scene where he's fucking his missus up the wall. That's my favourite scene.
I knew you was going to say that. I knew it. And is that your takeaway scene as well?
It was on the night.
Eddie, what was your favourite part of the film?
I like the bits on the train, because that brought and coming off the train and Bill being there pulling up, that brought back a lot of memories. But also, I think the first time he walks in the boozer and it's full on and he gets clocked, and because that brings back a few memories when you walk in the wrong boozer and everyone's looking at you, just go, oh, for fuck's sake. So I just thought when that happened, it's really made me laugh. I've been there a few times.
I think the one scene that sticks with me, and it was a little bit different in the book, but when they're I think it must have been like a Middlesbrough or Newcastle match when they were getting pelted with like bricks and all that, and then Gumbo gets a dart in his head and he just appears out of nowhere with his dart in his head, and I just thought, like, I mean, was that the kind of thing that would happen? Eddie,
it's a really famous photograph of at Swansea Cardiff, and the guy's got a dart hanging out his face and being led away by a copper, but while he's walking away, beaming, smiling. That used to be a big thing. I got downed with a coin once hit me in the eye, so I used to get all that. But golf balls with stuff stuck in them, throwing.
In all seriousness, though, my favourite scene would probably be where I think I can't remember what game it was, but they end up in the opposite team's crowd, and they just start singing the Millwall chants and everything, and like I say, he ends up on the pitch being dragged off, and you got that scene with him like on someone's shoulder. That for me, that was my favourite part of the film. My main takeaway. Everything else quite seemed forgettable, to be honest.
I think one of my laugh out loud bits was when they ended up in the pharmacy hiding, and they've all got the hairspray, and then the bloke goes, "I think they've gone now."
Doesn't say it in the film, but he does in the book. He's like, what the fuck were we going to do with this hairspray if they did turn up? I suppose it's one of them. You just panic, don't you? And I don't know.
I think that was in the same like match scene segment of the film where Chris legs it and he jumps on the bus and then he gets battered by the woman with his shopping.
And it turns up like the bumps into a couple of them.
That was quite good, actually. Yeah. So all in all, and I'm sure normally this is where we ask which you preferred, whether you preferred the book or the film. Richie, what is your verdict? Do you prefer the book or the film?
It's a no-brainer, and I think anybody who's done both, everybody will say the same thing. Next, the book by a country mile.
Eddie?
I might be wrong though.
No, I totally agree. I think you have to understand the film of when the film was made and how long ago it was made, and it was quite sort of a groundbreaking film on that side of things, I suppose. But yeah, I mean the books are like it's like on another planet level compared to the film. Books so much better.
I've saw on IMDb that there's there's rumours of a Running with the Firm film to be made. It's showing up on IMDb at least in the idea phase.
Well, those films make a lot of money. They hang around for a long time. They're constantly being played on sort of Sky channels and stuff like that. They make a lot of money, and they can be quite cheap.
I need to get people like yourself, though, more people like yourself, and people who've been there, seen it as consultants, so as they can make it properly, rather than it being just another one of those fucking football hooligan films which has become kind of generic now.
Yeah.
That is a perfect segue into our guest Eddy Brimson. We're talking about we'll say book, or you say novella. So can we say novella, Naughty Boy? Can you just talk us through first of all how the book became?
The book became because in 2012 I was approached to write a football violence film by Lionsgate, and my mate mine Joe was the director. They wanted to his first AD. They wanted him to direct his first film, and I said to him, "Look, I'll write this, but I don't want to write another tear me up film. I don't want to do Green Street 3. I don't want to do that. That's a definite no-no." And they were like, yeah, we don't want that. And then the first screenplay I wrote, it was much more about nature nurture them and us, how society molds you, and football violence or violence was the main character's thing, but it sort of manifested itself at football. But there were many reasons, very complex character. I wrote that. I took it in the Lionsgate, and they said, "No, it's a bit too art house. This is too art house." And so I tucked that one away. I wrote 3 or 4 more versions of the scripts, and in the end, we got to a point where I remember being in a meeting, and he goes, "We've had a word with Kaz from marketing, and she really thinks that we need a bit of a love interest in here." And I just went, "Does she now? Well, can we get Kaz in here? Because she's a fucking genius. She's telling the creative people to make the film to make it easier for her to market. Why don't we get an area in and write the film?" And that was, I wrote a final script for them. They did want Green Street 3. I wrote a final one. They didn't we needed just over £1 million to make it. They offered us half of it, and they wanted someone else to fund the rest of it. But Lionsgate wanted main billing, and you just can't get that. And Joe pulled in so many favors with actors. We had a whole cast lined up, really good British cast. And then they asked if they could buy the script, but because I'm quite a surprisingly loyal fella, I wouldn't do that because that would have cut Joe out. So I left it, and then after a few years, I was going back. I thought, I need something to do. I'll have a look at the scripts I've written, and I got the script out, and I thought, I'll turn that into a book. And the process of going from screenplay to book, it's not the way to do it. It's really not the way to do it. It's really arse about face, because it's a mammoth task. And then halfway through doing the book, I decided I might try and do it as a play at Edinburgh, because when I go to Edinburgh, I like to do something different. I do very different stand-up at Edinburgh, and I thought, I'll do this. I'll get some actors to do this. Actors are notoriously flaky, so I thought I'll get some comics to do it. Comics are notoriously flaky. So in the end, I thought, I'll have to do this myself. So I decided to do it myself, then turned it into a one-man play for an hour. And that changed the narrative of the original book. And then when I came back from Edinburgh, because it went very well in Edinburgh, I decided to really condense the book down. And that's why it's now a novella, because I didn't want any padding. It had to be bang, bang, bang. Every word had to count. So that's how we arrived at the book.
So can you give us a brief overview of what the book is about?
The book's about nature, right? The premise at the beginning for the book was everybody seems to have an excuse for their behaviour, right? No matter what they do, everyone's like, "This happened to me," or "I've got this, I've got that." Some people are just bad people. Some people are. There has to be an acceptance, and some people are just violent. Some people are just nasty people. And the character in this thing, he's a very violent man. But there's a lot. It's very complex. Yeah, Joe is the character in it. Very violent man. It starts in an institution, then we go on this hedonistic weekend away of sex, drugs, and violence, football violence, and then there's really chilling conclusion at the end, and then we come back to the institution, and it leaves you're not sure whether he's there working or whether he's there as a patient. So it leaves it like that. So. Yeah, so that's the character. Nurture, but he drops all in the book. He drops all these bombs about stuff that happened when he was a kid, and this happened, and this was my upbringing, and da 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 da. But when it comes to the conclusion at the end, it goes back on all those things, and it's just like the shit you people believe. You know, I'm just. These are all little. I don't really want to give it away, but these are all little.
No, don't.
Just about leading you down a different path, and in the end, he just goes. Some of us are just cunts.
well, I think we can leave Richie out here for a second, because I don't think Richie's managed to get through the book just yet, because he didn't get through running with the firm. But what I took from Joe, first of all, I thought he was, because obviously he starts off, and whether he's a cook or he's just a server in this, what I can gather is like a mental hospital maybe, but he seems very self-aware, he seems very intelligent, and he knows what he's doing, kind of thing. So what I was trying to picture was a guy who, and I'm not saying it's a dead-end job, but for a guy who's serving fish to mentally ill people, but he's really, how has he got to this point? I didn't quite understand. It's like, what is he doing in this job? If he's so self-aware and he's so intelligent, because you can see it, then what is the issue? And when you look, like you were saying about what happened in the past, it seemed he had quite a spoiler alert, he seemed to have quite a good upbringing as far as I was reading it. Yeah. And so it was like, where is this, but it's a really good, and like I said, it's very snappy, it's very straight to the point. You can follow it very easily. Which elements of the book came from the film, if you know what I mean? So when you wrote the script, which bits of the script survived the book? I mean, I was looking at maybe the fight in the chip shop, obviously the couple of maybe towards the end, and like the bits where he went away with the guys at the football, because that was kind of, because if you didn't know you and your writing background, you wouldn't have put that together, if you know what I mean. I think I was maybe expecting a little bit more of that rather than what I got, but what I got was probably even better, if you know what I mean. It was a really, really good journey, and I was trying to figure the guy out all the way along.
That's very kind of you to say. The bits, the bits with the football, the bits about. I mean, it's a very, very different from the original screenplay in the way it sets the scene about his family life, but the whole ethos of him coming from a good background, the stuff about how he was treated as a kid, but it's a lot about the political side of how he believes he's molded by society, but it's not what you want, what they want. He's got his own mind, and so that's a thread all the way through the original film. And then it does come back to this conclusion, what happens in the tube station, and then it does actually start in the institution and come back to the institution in the original screenplay. So yeah, that side of it. But I just had to cut out so much chaff from if anyone listening to this is into writing, best book I've ever read on writing is George Orwell. George Orwell's got a book called Why I Write, and it's about his writing process. And it's that every single word has to be there for a reason. Every word, and so that's why I think the novella. I cut it down to a novella. I could have padded it out easy. There's loads that I could have done. There's loads of scenes at football I could have put in. There's loads more about family and relationships I could have put in, but I didn't want any of that. I just wanted it to be bang, 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 bang. And so from that side of it, I just really condensed it all down for the book and for the play. But hopefully, someone might pick up on it eventually and go, "This is a much more interesting story." But it's got that element of football in it. I'm kind of bored of the football genre because it's all the same. Revenge, someone got killed, someone, it's all just crap. It's been done.
The one bit that kind of pricked my ears up a little bit was Iffy. Yeah. Now, Iffy was called Iffy for a reason, and if I remember correctly, you do a bit in your stand-up about when you're in Bangkok, and I think the bit that I remember was when the joke you tell is about when you're reading the menu.
Oh, that's years ago. Yeah,
and I don't know whether like your experience in Bangkok was kind of iffy, if you know.
No.
Not that actual experience, but like.
I've got a mate called Iffy Chris, and he's iffy for a reason, and I've also got other mates who've been out to that part of the world quite a few times, and that's amalgamation of 2 or 3 mates stuff that's happened to them that comes to that story. They've been actually a mate who was in exactly that position and then did come back and tell us, and it's like, mate, why did you tell us that? You're never going to live that down. There's a lot of truth in the book. There's a lot of true stories of stuff drawn in from all sorts of places.
Not to leave Ritchie out of that, the bit in the book with Iffy Ritchie was Eddie, do you want to tell it because you wrote the bloody book?
I've got a mate called Iffy Chris, and he's called Iffy because when he was younger, he went out to Bangkok to find himself, right? But he basically fucked off so other people couldn't find him. And then one night, whilst partaking in some oral stimulation, he sits up to go for a cheeky little stroke at a horse's nose, only to find the horse he was with turned out to be quite a big part filly. Yeah. So that's, and then he leant back, let go, and she stuck a finger off his bum, and he just thought, I've paid for it, I might as well carry on.
To be honest, it's one of them. If I was in Thailand, I'd when in Rome, just have a go, don't you? You might as well.
That's the story. There's a fair bit of dark humour in the book, I think.
I need to check that out. Is it on Audible?
How did you but what else? I mean, it's only about 104 pages, isn't it, Eddie? So you can read
27,000 words. It is, so that's quite short.
Yeah. So I mean, I think I probably read it in maybe like 2 or 3 sittings. So it's because it is a really good read. You do go all the way. You just carry on. It's very, very snappy, which is really good. When you're doing the play, is it different at all? Because now obviously you're a stand-up comedian and obviously you do Edinburgh show, so you've got to do a 55, you have to remember 55 minutes in your head, but is it kind of like scene for scene, word for word in the play? Have you just adapted it?
But obviously the play, so this is how the play's just about 10,000 words, the book's 27,000 words, so again the play's really condensed down. But it's just 55 minutes of dialogue, and I've taken a really sort of pivotal to get the story in the play right, so that it's the same thread. I've just had to take really pivotal scenes, and that was quite hard doing that because there's a lot. It's like any writing process. You've got a really good idea and you want to get it in, but sometimes you just have to go, I can't. It's not going to fit.
So, do you find that doing it that way, you end up losing a bit of substance that you'd like to have kept in, but you couldn't?
Yeah, there's a few bits that I'd like to have kept in. If I do the play now as an hour, but if if need be, I could easily do it to an hour and a half or an hour, so probably an hour and 15, hour and 20, and put other bits in. But it's still the backbone of the story is I managed to keep into the place so people still go away with exactly the same thing you said. Is he working? Is he not working? This blood guy is really complex. He's vile, but I kind of get it. I kind of understand. That's the thing that people say. The most disturbing thing is people say, I can really relate to that, and I really don't like myself for relating to some of that stuff.
It's kind of like the anti-hero thing. It's like the film Falling Down when it's Michael Douglas. He just loses it, and then in the middle of the street, and he just goes off on, and everybody you meet will go, I completely get him.
It's funny you should say that. It's funny you should say about Joe, the character. I didn't see him as a violent person. I kind of like, as I was reading it, he was kind of like, this is me, this is my life kind of thing. Like, I didn't really get like, I'm a really angry, violent person from Joe, though. I mean, obviously there was some scenes where yes, but I didn't take that. I just, as I said, I thought he was a very self-aware person.
There's a lot about compassion, and in the book, there's one of the big threads in it. There's a lot about compassion, and there's a lot about loyalty and love in the book, and that's what makes him complex. And his violence, although he admits he's a very, very violent man, he enjoys violence. He kind of seeks it out. It's very targeted. It's very, very targeted, which is why you might think, it's not just the sort of bloke who go out and just lay into someone in the pub. It's sort of targeted, but there are other things. He's got a very moralistic stance on a lot of stuff, particularly politically, of where people like him are valued within society, and that's where his anger comes from.
I think well, one of my favourite parts, or probably the favourite part of the book, was with Spider-Man, which I thought was so funny. Not obviously, like I took it that the guy might have had like a mental issue or maybe Down syndrome or something like that. I kind of took it that was the character, but that bit where the bit with the chairs where he wouldn't move, I just thought that was so funny.
And he explains about how. Actually, that they're not. You do understand. He keeps saying, "You do understand. It's not him we're laughing at. We're not
exactly.
Laughing at him. And actually, you're lucky that it's us who found him, not someone else, because we'll actually look after him. We're using him to take the piss out of ourselves because they're all ribbing each other." And that's. And
I think, and I think that's what you were saying there about his aggression is targeted. And obviously his friends' aggressions are targeted because there's a guy here who's quite vulnerable, and even though I think it was Darren might have started winding him up to start with, he proper had Darren in the net 3 or 4 times, and everyone just thought that's so funny.
And then he does make the point of saying, "How dare you feel sorry for him or compare him to me, because he's a far better man than I will ever be. So don't be hypocritical when you try to judge us all the same. We are different. He's clearly very different from me, but he's a better man than I'll ever be." And he says that's one of the whole things with that scene. It's like, we're not 6 blokes taking the piss out of a Down syndrome kid. We're actually we're using him to take the piss out of us and each other. And actually, he's lucky that it's us he's with, and not some people who really would take the piss out of him. In fact, we'll make sure he gets where he needs to be. Because he said, in fact, lucky him going out shopping with his auntie.
That's a clever piece of writing on your part, then, because that could be that could have easily have been done wrong and not come across that way, if you know what I mean. So the fact that you can read it and you can get that's clever writing. Whereas if I tried to do that, it would be me taking the piss out of someone with Down syndrome.
Well, it's very kind of you to say. Those things take a long time to write and get right. If you've got an idea of what the message you're trying to say, what the messages you're trying to do with this scene, then it's just a matter.
I just want to point out as well, I wouldn't take the piss out of someone with Down syndrome, but that's how it would come across.
How many disclaimers are we having in this podcast? Eddie, do I feel that there's a sequel to Naughty Boy somewhere in the works, or?
Well, it's funny. Some a lot of people have said that they want more from that character or some of the other characters. My next
prequel,
thing
maybe.
I want to write now. I want to write something which is full of humour. Is the next thing I want to write, because as much as I love performing this, it's fantastic to do live. Fucking brilliant to do live.
I mean, you probably should, as a comedian, really do at least one thing, shouldn't you? That's got humour.
Yeah. So the next play I'm written, I know what it's going to be about. I've just got to get my arse in gear and write it. There's going to be much more humorous, but again, it's really going to have. There's going to be moments of real political. It's about making a point. The next one, it's going to be about. It's called The Comedian. It's going to be about a comedian, but it's how we perceive you, not the other way around.
Interesting. Very
you
interesting indeed.
Ask, what do you think we think of you? And so it's coming from that perception. So there'll be a lot of social comment in there, particularly now. I don't know if you've been out gigging. It's people are strange. It's the world has changed.
Well, everyone's back in the mix now. So Eddie, where can we find Naughty Boy? Where can we find it?
You can get the novella as either a Kindle download, and you can get a free Kindle off Amazon, or a paperback from Amazon. And live, I'm taking it on tour wherever I can take it. My next run of gigs are in at the Camden Fringe, 23rd to 27th of August at the Hope Theatre in Islington. I'm really looking forward to that. And then there'll just be other dates dotted around, because getting a theatre run at the moment is quite tough, because theatres are just all over the shop. Yeah.
Of course,
but,
but it's something. But it's something to have. I think the good thing about creating something, you've got it in the pocket. You know what I mean? It's not gonna. There's no time limit on that. So you've got until forever. Richie, before we wrap up, have you got any final words?
No, just follow us everywhere. We're on Facebook, on Twitter. You can follow us on anywhere. Most places you can find a podcast, but mainly go to Spotify, because that's what everybody does, or Apple Podcasts, or Google Podcasts, adapted to screen podcast. So, yeah, that's pretty much it.
And Eddie, where can we find your latest information?
On my website, it's all on there, www.eddybrimson.com. And I'm on, Eddy Brimson Facebook, Eddy Brimson YouTube, and you see some clips from the play. If you want, they're up on YouTube as well, and on my website.
I've seen a few of those. Yeah, I've seen a few of those. They're pretty cool. Well, I think that's everything. Then have we covered everything? Have we missed anything out? That's the main thing.
I don't think so.
Good.
We usually talk about the soundtrack of the film, but there's not really anything to say about the soundtrack of the film, because it was like an American horror film soundtrack.
Normally, sorry, Eddie. Normally, what we do, we pick like a soundtrack for the film. So whether it's like a band or whatever, but it's quite funny because you picked a soundtrack for Naughty Boy. And that's what made me laugh. When I read it, I was like, he's picked a soundtrack for his book. That's exactly what we do. What was the soundtrack you picked for Naughty Boy?
It's a band called Newtown Aces, which a punk band. And then it's a new band, they're a punk band, but they're very political. But the lyrics in that really do mirror the writing in the book and what's in the play.
Richie's got a very successful other podcast called You Haven't Heard This Music podcast, where he plays and showcases new music. Yeah.
Well, Newtown Aces, absolutely superb. If you like music which actually says something, which has got a political message to it, it's fantastic. Absolutely brilliant.
Check that out.
I thought maybe like a soundtrack from The Who might have fitted quite well with ID. A bit rocky, maybe a little bit more angry than the other rock that was knocking about, if you know what I mean. I thought that would have suited quite well. What about you, Richie?
That type of thing. I think the Sex Pistols would have been too punk for that film, maybe.
I think so.
But yeah, that kind of not. Anger, but not too. I don't know. Not the fucking soundtrack it had. It sounded like something from Friday the 13th in parts.
I thought, something like The Who, someone like the Ramones, I thought would have done quite well.
Yes, Ramones were cool
as a soundtrack in there. Well, Eddie, thank you very much for joining us. It's been a
Thanks for
pleasure.
having me.
Nice to see you again. It's been about 5 years, but nice to see you again.
And likewise, mate. Thank you very much for having me on.
Yeah, and until next time, nobody likes us.
No one likes us.
We don't care. No one likes us. No one likes us.
We left early on the Friday to make the most of the weekend. Myself, Darren, Philbs, Keith, Ryan, Eddie and Iffy. Now there's a reason Iffy's called Iffy, obviously. A good few years back, Iffy headed out to Asia in order to find himself. Well, that's what he told his dear old mum anyway. It actually fucked off so certain other people couldn't find him, if you know what I mean. But mums being mums, well, they don't need to hear all that now, do they? Like a lot of men who headed out east, Iffy only made it far as Bangkok, mainly due to the vast amounts of horizontal refreshment that is so readily available in that part of the world to young fuckwits such as himself. One night, whilst partaking in some oral stimulation, Iffy decided to sit up and go for a cheeky little stroke of the horse's nose, only to find that the particular filly he was with turned out to be quite a big part donkey, if you know what I mean. They both froze, their eyes locked, and not quite knowing what to do, Iffy let go and began to lean back. However, the he-she positioned between his legs and with his cock still in situ, decided to test the water by pushing a digit up Iffy's bum. No, not most people. Iffy can't resist a bargain, and having paid in advance, well, best blowjob he's ever had, apparently. His mistake was coming back and telling Eddie, because within an hour we all knew. And from that moment on, Christopher J. Mills became known as Iffy. Iffy's also the supplier of Class A's, the pills and the powder that keep weekends such as that jogging along just the way they're meant to. But a group, Darren's the sensible one. Well, when I say sensible, apart from me, of course. And what I mean by that is Darren don't just fly off the handle, he's a thinker. Unlike Philbs. That said, Philbs flying off the handle is a beautiful sight. Believe me, I've seen it. Because Philbs, he ain't shy when it comes to punching people. In fact, none of us are. It's probably why we get on so well. Our collective liking for violence.